Welcome back to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler, and on today's episode, I sit down with comedy club pioneer Joel Richardson and one of his protege comics, Brendan Donegan. Now sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before introducing my two guests, Joel Richardson, who's a buddy of mine, local comedy legend, producer, comedy club owner, and Brendan Donegan, who is a comic who is on the up-and-coming list and somebody that Joel is really helping. And before we get into their stories and all that, I want to first tell you we can hear the podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeart, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. All I ask is that you click the download button, actually the automatic download button, because that makes it a little easier for everybody. And subscribe, share it with everybody. Tell people about the show. I've got 107 now, including this will be 107 with this one. And I've interviewed Kurt Schilling twice. Irish Mickey Ward, if you remember the movie The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg, he played him in the movie, and my favorite episode today because he's my favorite boxer and boxing is my favorite sport. I've had, I just had Doug Ellen on the other day. So I've had a lot of really cool shows, and I think this is going to be an amazing one too because I personally know Joel and he's a friend of mine and I want to help him. And his story is amazing. The things he did during COVID is just mind-numbing. But yeah, so I ask you to just share the love on the podcast. That'd be great. If you want to learn more about me personally, my career, things I've done in law enforcement, the military, or you want to read my book, get a copy of it, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, which is a story I wrote about my life story with my brother Andy, who was autistic and stuttered and unfortunately was killed in a car accident in 1989 when I was 18 years old. And the story just tells our life story together as brothers, and then how my life was impacted by his death after, and how I wouldn't be the person I am today without my brother. So go to mattcubbler.com if you want to learn more about that. All right, without further ado, Joel Richardson and Brandon Donegan, how are you?
Hey.
Good, man. Thanks for having us.
Nah, this is gonna be fun. And Joel, you know the setup for my show. I don't really have a plan, which I think is kind of how we really connect with that. Even though you run a big operation, comedy is kind of like an improvisation of life, right? So you kind of got to learn how to wing it. And I think that's one of the cool parts of doing this kind of show is, and my life is 99% wing it anyway. So to do something structured would just be counter to who I am as a person. So how are things going with you, first of all, Joel?
Everything's going good, man. I mean, we got through the storm, and now we just got into spring. So we didn't make any money in November, December, and January, but we turned the corner in February, having guys like Andrew Dice Clay come down, and we finally got to the spring. So the cost of doing business went up, having to get space heaters and propane and stuff like that. But now we kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. The days are getting longer, and it's getting warmer outside. So we're excited for the spring and summer.
I love it. Brandon, what's up with you? I know we talked a little bit before we got to hit record here, and you're up in Jersey City, which I apologize to you for, but apparently Jersey City is making a fucking comeback. It's a Renaissance city. So how are things up there?
It's making a comeback, man. It's a nice area. It's getting gentrified. It's a cool place to live, but things are good. I mean, I'm feeling optimistic. I feel like things are, clubs are starting to open back up. More comedy's happening. Businesses are, I feel like we're getting there. So far to the start of this spring, I'm feeling optimistic. Starting to get some more bookings. More comedy's happening. So things are looking up.
Well, I gave you a little bit of a heads up before the show, before we started recording, that I asked one question and then the rest we just figure out. So I asked this question just to give you guys a little bit of background why I asked a broad question. As a cop, when I'm interviewing a suspect or interviewing a victim, you want to know where their head's at. You want to know where their mind's at. If it's a bad guy, you want to find out where he's starting to come up with his story on how he's going to try to lie to you or steer me away from him. So yeah, it's a broad question that gets their mind opening up. And it kind of gives away a little bit of their who they are as a person and what their baseline is, so to speak. And for a victim, it takes that nervousness away when you give them a big, broad question, because it forces them to think about not the thing that they're there as a victim of. So not that either of you are bad guys or victims, but I'm going to ask you the broad question. And the broad question I ask everybody is, and I'll start with you, Joel. Who is Joel Richardson?
So I think I'm a comedy producer, talent manager, and proud uncle. I'm not a father. Made it to 40, never being married, never had any kids. But SoulJoel's is my baby. So I put all my time and energy into either being an uncle or keeping our business afloat in magic talent like Brendan Donegan.
I like it. And your social media is very clear that you're a very proud uncle. As a matter of fact, I know you went and got some ice cream. Yes, last night I guess it was. You went and got some ice cream at our local ice cream place, which is amazing. Handled ice cream here in Royersford.
Yeah. Yep. And they're a sponsor of ours. So it was a 3-for-1. I got ice cream for my nieces and nephew, and we got to support a local business.
I love it. All right, Brandon, you're up, pal. Who is Brendan Donegan?
I know I didn't do anything. I know I'm a good guy, but I feel guilty for some reason with this question. I didn't know I was walking into an interrogation. I love it. Jeez. Who is Brendan Donegan? I don't know. Man, I am a stand-up comedian, 28-year-old stand-up comedian. Grew up in South Jersey, lived in Philadelphia for a while. I started comedy in Philadelphia, and then I started right after college, where I met the great SoulJoel, who started managing me right away, and I've been doing comedy ever since. That's pretty much all I got going on in my life right now, is trying to make an attempt at being a successful stand-up comedian. So that's about it.
I love it. I think, and I don't know a lot of comedians, but I know a lot of people who think they're fucking funny. So, but most comedians, I think in general, are self-depreciating and pretty much like, I'm just trying to make it work. Like, I have no fucking idea what's going to happen, but I'm just going to grind and see what happens. And you basically throw yourself on a stage to potentially get heckled the fuck off or booed or nobody laughs or like that. You have to have, either you have to be mentally ill, you have to have low self-esteem, or you're like, you have daddy issues or something like that, where you just need somebody to tell you you're great at something, or hopefully that's the end result. And I think you're also kind of like, what is insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So I think comedy is like a combination of all that. But when you get it right, when you finally figure it out, it's magic.
I think
they say comedy comes from either. Okay.
Sorry, I was just saying, I think you literally just profiled the stand-up comedian like that, hit the nail right on the head.
Well, I forgot to tell you that my background's in human behavior and body language. I'm an expert according to the federal government in that. So it's kind of, I read people for a living. So it's kind of, you can tell a joke and I can watch you tell a joke and tell you if you're full of shit. So Joel, let me ask you this. So first of all, how long have you been doing the comedy? So I know you left your job in like 2009.
Yeah. So I performed for the first time in May. It'll be 15 years when the first time I hit the stage, and full time in May it'll be 12 years without. That's when I left doing pharmaceutical sales. I left my day job.
That's, there's, as an entrepreneur, I tell people I'm an entrepreneur with a pillow, meaning I have such a grind in my personality. Like I'll outwork anybody. So if you tell me I got these things I got to do in a week, if it takes 100 hours, it takes 100 hours, I'll accomplish it. And most entrepreneurs they may work 100 hours, but it's solely towards their entrepreneurial endeavors. I decided that as an entrepreneur, I'm going to keep my job as a cop because I need that security and that blanket of protection. And I need to have that pillow that if shit goes sideways entrepreneurially, at least I have my day job, right? And I just figured out how to make my life work around that. And I have a very, very supportive wife and children who I don't know what's going to happen when I retire as a cop and I'm home more. But it's going to be weird because when you work midnight shift, for a long time, I was working midnight shift, 12 hours, 7 p to 7 a, and then working until 3 o'clock in the afternoon during my job and sleeping for 2.5 hours and going back to work. And I did that for 6 or 7 years. I was averaging 22 hours a week of sleep. And that's, outside of, Copenhagen and coffee, I think those were the only two things that were keeping me alive. But as an entrepreneur, Joel, when you decided to drain it all, you drained your 401k, you literally all in with the chips. How scared were you?
Oh, terrified, man, because the path that I chose, there was no blueprint to follow it. There's no one really that does shows in other people's venues. I never owned my own brick and mortar until November 1st of 2019. So terrified and almost I tell people I was 100% commission salesperson. So until I did a show, I didn't know how much money I was making, and I paid out the comics and then figure out what I'm going to make. And if there's snow, that means there's probably no show, which means no dough. And you have to all take all that in consideration and not knowing what was going to happen. But I figured I was 29, didn't have any kids, didn't have a wife. So I was now is the best time ever just to give it a shot and see what happens.
Timing is everything. Like in just about all things in life. Like I always tell, I mentor a lot of kids and I always tell them, you are where you are when you're supposed to be there, right? It's just the secret sauce is knowing when you're supposed to be there, that this is the moment, right? That's it. When you think you're supposed to be somewhere and you're not there, and then you get all bogged down and you get in your own head and you get all fucked up. You are where you are when you're supposed to be there, because that's how the world works and the universe works, and frequency and vibration and energy and all that. It's just that if you're not in tune and paying attention to it, you don't know that it was there when it was there. And I think knowing it, somebody like you who recognized when you didn't have, all of the things that typically keep somebody from making that decision, when they were not on the table for you, it kind of helped you. Yeah. This is that moment.
Brendan and I actually talk about this all the time about the universe. Last summer, we had Dave Attell, which was one of our first big headliners that came in on a national level. And Dave called me up and he texts. It's so funny. He's just like, hey, Joel, it's Dave A. Like it was all spread out. It was just hilarious the way he texted me, because apparently he has a flip phone. And I called him up and he asked me who's on the show. And I told him, and then he goes, at a guest spot. Well, we've had Louis C.K. here 3 times. So I had that as a special guest. I was like, who's the guest spot? Who are you bringing? He goes, Joe, aren't you running a fucking comedy festival? Don't you have 30 comics in the back? Just grab one of them and throw them on the stage. And so I called up Brendan. He said he was just literally manifesting the fact that he was going to open up for Dave Attell. Him and his girlfriend are very into visualization and making that happen. And so, and when he showed up, he was like, that's unbelievable. His dad had just passed away. So this was bringing him out of a dark time. And I go to introduce him to Dave, and Dave goes, oh, Brendan, thank you so much for doing this. And Brendan just looked at him like, you're thanking me for doing this? It's like, it was a real cool moment, but it's all about, like you said, the signs of the universe. Like, this is the path that Brendan was meant to take and the path he's meant to be on.
That's a great story. And I am super, I've been doing deep dives into 5D consciousness and frequency and energy and, what you put out, you receive, all that for the last 2 years or so. And I actually starting a podcast network with 2 of my buddies who I physically have never met, but we've been online podcasting friends for the last couple of years. And one of the channels on our network is going to be all dedicated to that, to the enlightenment component of things. So it's fascinating how, and it's true. And I always tell people, they're like, oh, that's a bunch of wacky nonsense or Reiki or whatever the fuck they want to say. And I'm like, I'll break it down real simple. Have you ever walked into a room and you're like, man, it's fucking stressing here. I can cut the tension with a knife. I said, that is an unspoken energy receiving moment. That's the world around us. That's your intuition saying something's not right, or the hair stand up on the back of your neck, or whatever those nonverbal, unexplainable things are. That's the universe speaking to you in an energy frequency way. And if you are willing, you can tap into that and really launch that in a way that helps you in every aspect of your life, not just in relationships, but in, like you're talking about with manifestation. That's a real thing. And it's, I've manifested more things in my life with no money, no time, and things just happen the way they're supposed to happen because I wanted it to happen, and I connected with the energy around me so that it would happen. Tell me about that. Tell me how, because I love that you and your girlfriend are into that, Brendan. And I don't want to know what other weird shit you're into, but I love the fact that you're into that. And I'm not gonna lie, I probably would be into the other stuff too. but only from like afar. But tell me about your energy manifestation, how you got into that.
Yeah, I don't know how I, kind of discovered it. I honestly feel like it was just something that maybe back in college, I started to like my dad taught me meditation, and I think maybe it just started with that, and then I just felt like there were things that had happened in my life, sometimes for better or for worse, that I'm like, man, I pictured this, like I felt like I knew it was going to happen, or it was kind of manifesting in my brain the whole time, and then it would happen. And then I just started to think like, I think that there's something to kind of visualizing. And then I had heard other people talk about it, online, or can't remember where. But manifesting, things that you want, I don't want to say like necessarily something like The Secret or something like that. I don't have a name for it, but kind of along those lines of, I started to realize that there were certain things that I would kind of visualize over and over again, kind of put myself there and just see myself doing it. And then there would be little things that would actually come to fruition. And then I just kind of kept up with it. And my philosophy behind it now is, when there's something I want, I really will try to, every day for 10 or 20 minutes, sit down and think about it, and literally just put myself there in my head and just think like, I've already done this. And then you take action toward it, work your ass off, even if it's little steps, but, working toward it, and then just trying to let go of expectations of how I'm going to get there. Because although there have been some things that I've felt like I visualized and manifested, they never come exactly the way I thought they were going to, but I do wind up getting there. So I've learned like, all right, figure out what you want, kind of speak that into existence, work your ass off, and then just let go of expectations of when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And I just feel like that's helped me so much in my life. And sometimes it's more difficult to get into that. I think it all kind of comes down to, there's certain things where for whatever reason I find realistic, and those are the things that come true. But there's times where I think things don't come true because subconsciously I don't maybe 100% believe it, and I kind of have to get myself there. So a lot of times it's a lot of work toward that. So I don't really know how I think just through life experience, and then one small thing happening, and then just building on that. But now it's become like really, I firmly believe in that give and take with energy, and that's like, one of the biggest things I believe in.
And I think that's as a person who's trying to connect with another human being in a room full of human beings, right? I'm an inspirational speaker. I do a lot of different functional things outside of being a cop. The greatest gift you can have is to connect. Like when I speak, people afterward will come out and say, I thought you were speaking directly to me. Well, I was. Even though there were 400 people in the room, I was speaking to each one of you individually. And when you have that ability to manifest energy and share that energy with everybody receives that energy and believes that there's this one-on-one connection with you and themselves. And I think that's the key. If you're a performer, if you're someone who is performing, whether it's a heartfelt story about your brother dying in a car accident and he was autistic, or you're a comedian trying to get somebody to laugh, the goal is to share whatever the intention was for that joke or that bit or whatever with that person, so they receive it in the way that you have planned it. Right? Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, a lot of times we'll find crowd members doing that, where like, whether they just got caught up in the moment, you forget that people get excited and start laughing out loud, but they'll start heckling, and they don't really mean it. You could, like you said, you're profiling people, and comics aren't psychic, but they can read a room and read a crowd. And just last week, he just started talking to me when I was on stage, and I was only on stage for like 2 minutes introducing the host. And you're like, God, but you just got to stop day drinking. Like the guy he was so hammered that he just thought, oh, you're talking to me. You're like, yeah, there's also 100 other people here that I'm talking to them. But yeah, as long as I can read people and I know it's coming from a good place, I don't really get upset. It's when things are coming from an evil place that I ever, my feathers get ruffled. I'm like, all right, this person's probably got to go, or it's going to get worse.
All right, so let's do a deep dive, because I think one of the coolest things, and I've been watching from the day you opened your shop inside a building, which didn't last as long as you probably thought it would, where you would be hosting shows inside of a cool brick warehouse building along the river in Royersford, Pennsylvania. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's about 30 miles outside of Philadelphia, northwest of the city. That's where I live, and that's where Joel lives, and where his business is. And so you opened this, you sold out everything, you cashed everything in, and you have a building now that is your home, where SoulJoel's comedy is going to be rocking every night, and it's got this cool, like, bluesy feel on the inside. And then the fucking pandemic happens. Let's first talk about the excitement of having your own place and the work of having opened a brick and mortar facility myself in the gym world. I understand the pride and the effort that it took to get it to look the way that you envisioned it would look. Let's talk about that. What was it like when you found out you're going to be moving into that place, and what was it like opening your first business?
It was great. We left the fear of leaving Valley Forge, where we were for 7 years, and moving, 10 to 20 minutes west of there. So that was kind of terrifying, but exciting at the same time, because we had our own space and we could pull the trigger on any show we wanted. I went from 1 day a week in November 2019 to being open 5 days a week by the end of February, literally 4 months later, and then 2 weeks, shut down due to the pandemic. But I'll never forget, it was the Sunday right after we were open 5 days a week for the first time, and my dad, he's still living in China. They obviously got shut down before we did, and he just told me, I'll never forget, he goes, "Well, start saving, because it's going to happen." And I was like, now it's going to happen. Like, I just started getting big boy bills with a staff and rent and my own place. I'm like, this can't end now. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we're on the side of the river that's Montgomery County. We got shut down a week before everybody else, but he was right. And I never wanted my father to be wrong more in my life.
So when the pandemic hit, and you had the mandatory, everybody had the 2 weeks to stop the spread, right, or slow the spread, or whatever the fucking nonsense phrase was that never.
Anywho,
I digress. When that part happened, which everybody was like, "Oh shit, we're all gonna die from fucking a disease," when did your brain start shifting to the pivot, to the how do I go from because I closed, as you know, I closed my business here in Royersford permanently, because I knew my pivot was impossible. I was, gyms were going to be one of the last things that were going to open up. They weren't going to allow, especially the type of work we did in ours, which was very hands-on, in-person, up in their face kind of training and neuromuscular rehab, that I knew that any type of alterations to that, or you have to have this, that, or the other thing that the government would tell me, which had no interest in understanding my business, that it wasn't going to work. So we closed permanently. When did you ever have a thought that you weren't going to reopen? And then when did you have that aha moment to go from inside outside?
Probably it was like late May. We decided talking to our landlord, Rick Lewis of Lewis Environmental, and it's been really helpful, this whole thing. He decided to show us where eventually he's going to have a riverfront development, but in the time being, it's an empty space, and we might as well, utilize it. So our first show ended up being Friday, July 3rd, and we kind of mapped it all out, and Brendan captured all this in the documentary, but we just never stopped, and we kind of made it outside, and just knew that was the best case scenario with social distance, and it being 25% indoors. Our capacity was only 140 inside, so that would be, we're doing a show for like 25, 30 people. Just wasn't worth it, so we decided to stay outside, and we've been outside ever since. It's now our 4th season outside. We started in the summer, made it all the way through the winter, and here we are in the spring, closing in on 10 months of being outside.
I never, because of the timing of when you open and then when COVID hit, I never got into your place to see a show when it was inside. So my first experience with SoulJoel was outside, sitting in a sand pit, like I was at a beach, and the boardwalk. So you had it, and I don't know if this was intentional, but it looked like a piece of the boardwalk is the stage, right? Like, so in my head, I'm sitting on the beach watching a boardwalk street performer, playing songs or doing comedy or whatever. That's kind of the vibe I got. I'm like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
Bring a keg or case of beer or whatever you need, and you socially distance, whatever, but it was still, it was a big enough lot of sand to where it made it not weird that you're sitting outside doing a comedy thing, right?
Yeah, that was a 40-foot. The stage is a 40-foot tractor trailer that we turned into. We bought right across the river from AC Miller, and we just turned into a black box. But yeah, that's the complete vibe that we were going for. So I'm glad you felt that.
Yeah, it's I love the like as a cop, like I hear the calls come in on the nights when I'm not at your place or whatever, and I can hear, and we're on the same radio frequency as Royersford's police department, and we use the same dispatch center. So I'll hear the noise complaints, from the people from Spring City bitching about the loudness because they do 2 shows and sometimes they go a little late, and like I would giggle because I'm like, those people that are complaining have no idea the value that was being brought to humanity, and that's what. And I said this to Doug Allen yesterday when I had him on the show, and I'm like, Entourage is kind of like an escape. Like when people would watch that show, I totally dug that show because it was kind of like, if I were going to be super famous, I'd have my squad with me, and that would be it. Everyone else would be trying to get in on the inside, but they would never make it. And that would be my thing. So I always really felt a connection to the show, and it kind of takes you out of that, whatever shit's going on in your world. You can really just sort of dive into something that really may not be real or may not be long-term fixed, but it's enough to get you out of that shit show that's in your head sometimes. And I think what you brought, not only to the fact that it was a business pivot, and I'm proud of you for being able to make that decision and smart enough to make it work, and the patience and all that stuff that comes with it, and keeping people employed and all that kind of stuff. But more so, I'm proud of the fact that you brought something that created a distraction for the community, so that they didn't have to have all day, every day, and every night a shit show called 2020.
A lot of people have said that. So many people, whether it was one show or multiple shows, whether they lost a loved one or, like you just said, just brought them some sense of normalcy. A lot of people have thanked us over and over again for what our team's been able to do. And not to mention bring national acts to a town of 4,900 people. It's not even 5,000. So, but yeah, I mean, it's been amazing, and people like you supporting it's been great. But yeah, we had 2 shows with Andrew Dice Clay, and literally I was cleaning up and letting people, and right when the noise ordinance ended, we got our complaint. I'm like, all right, I get it. We're in the wrong, but we happen to be cleaning up and forgot to turn the music down. But right. Don't forget, this guy has been a national headliner for 40 years. He was on Entourage. He had his own show, Dice. He was in an award-winning film with Matthew McConaughey and Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. A Star Is Born. It won an Emmy. It was an Academy Award-winning movie. It's frustrating, man.
And I think, though, that you handle it with class, number one, because you're always you do.
Was I just talking out loud?
Yes. But typically, you in the more professional setting, you handle those moments with a lot of grace and a lot of class and a lot of professionalism, whereas I probably wouldn't be able to do that. There would be a giant "go fuck yourself" at the end of every sentence when somebody was complaining about whatever I was doing to try to help the community, and then they're bitching about the music being too loud at 11 o'clock. Go fuck yourself. Brandon, when you're being managed, or I don't know what the term is, I guess managed, is that what it is?
Yeah.
By Joel. What is it? First of all, I think in your world of trying to become an up-and-comer, becoming that big name, Louis C.K. or whoever, if you were trying to hit that level, you got to have somebody that can help you navigate the nonsense, right? Because there's a lot of, there's probably, as with any other entertainment type business, as you're growing, there's probably a lot of shitbirds that try to take advantage of you or don't pay what you're owed at the end of the night or whatever, if it's a paying gig. Is how impactful has it been to have somebody like Joel helping you through this process to get to where hopefully you get to?
It's been everything. I mean, that's been how I've gotten any level of a career that I've had. What cracks me up about Joel, as you guys are talking right now, and as we were talking about manifestation, is I think sometimes, and one of the reasons why I love Joel and have gravitated toward him, is Joel manifests things like without, I think, even realizing that that's just the way he operates. Like, the good thing about Joel is, one, he's a big dreamer, which I am too. And the other thing is he works his ass off. So like, if you had anybody else that was, had a club that got shut down, and if Joel had surrounded himself with a bunch of, pessimistic, or some might say realistic people that were like, dude, you're not going to make any money. What if it rains? Like, how are you going to deal with this? What if a fight breaks out? All of the bad that Joel doesn't think. I mean, I can't stress enough sometimes how little Joel thinks about some of this stuff, but somehow then it works out because he thinks big, he works his ass off, and he doesn't worry about, and then he figures it out along the way. And, that's kind of how I've, tried to operate too. But one of the biggest things when I was starting out, I just kind of got really lucky that I happened to stumble into Valley Forge Casino one day with my girlfriend, and I met Joel. And like, it just so weirdly happened where, I really wanted to get into comedy. I was like, let me just talk to this guy who was hosting the show, which was Joel. And I'm like, hey man, do you do an open mic? Is there? And Joel just goes, I'll put you on a show. I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll see what you got. And I'm like, okay. He just gave me an opportunity out of the blue. And then it was up to me from there. But like, that got my foot in the door. And then, we just kept going and going, and we stayed in touch. But one of the things that, because at first, like, I don't know anything about the comedy business. I don't know how it works. Joel's teaching me the ropes. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, this random, like, producer in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Like, I don't know if he's like this shady business guy, if he's a good guy, because I don't know him yet. But then as I would start to work with, because Joel would pair me up with like these great headliners, and it would be like Dan Soder, Julian McCullough, Mark Nor, whoever it is. And I started to get to work with all these people, and Joel like knows all of them, Chris DiStefano, Giannis Pappas, and they all started with him. And every single one of them would tell me, they're like, stick with Joel. Like, you're in the best position that you could be in. So all those guys I look up to, and those are the careers that I want to have. So to hear that from them, that they had like full trust and full confidence in this guy, I was like, man, I think I just got really lucky with a guy who knows the business. He knows people in the business, and he's just given me every opportunity that I've had. Like, there's not that much I'm really bringing to the table. I'm not a draw, I'm a fairly new comedian, but it's just one of the good things Joel does is he sees people that, he, has faith in, and then he just gives me opportunities, to work with people or to get on stage. And then he's let me figure it out. And what more could you ask for as you're trying to figure out the business? It's just an opportunity.
Dude, Brendan, that's a great story about how, trusting, first of all, you got to be trusting to have some stranger that, you're walking to a comedy club in a casino. Nothing good ever happens at a comedy club in a casino. I'm pretty sure there's some stories that most people don't want out on public airways. But the fact that you have become friends and trusting of each other, and there's a big component to success when it comes to having support people around you to help you get there, right? So, Joel, what is it about Brendan when he walks in? There's always, for me at least, when I meet somebody for the first time that I just sort of know, like something just clicks. Was there something like that with Brendan, or did you like say, this kid's got some balls, let's see what he's got? Like, what was it?
Yeah, well, so a little bit of both probably. It didn't hurt that he had two good-looking girls with him. No, but he approached me in the right way. I could just feel his good energy, and the way I always was taught by the people that he mentioned, like Giannis and Julian. They're guys that mentored me, and they always said there's always room for 1 5-minute bomb on a show. And I mean, Brendan probably doesn't want to hear this from me, but like, it's like if you go on stage and absolutely get no laughs for 5 minutes, he won't hurt my show, because I'll put him on the show with 3 other comics, and that 5 minutes will just be forgotten about. But he could go on and knock it out of the park and be a complete bonus. It's house. I mean, we're at a casino. Let's use the word. It's house money. He goes up and does well. He's not going to hurt. And so what Brendan kept saying is, I gave him the opportunity. I opened the door, but his talent got him to stay there. So when he did that first show, there's been so many people over the last 15 years that I put on shows, and they had this attitude going, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here. And they go there. Not only do they bomb or they don't help me promote it at all, they have no one in the audience. I'm like, dude, you couldn't have freaking brought your parents or like a brother and sister. Like, no, you're not going to bring anyone to the show. So Brendan, that first show, I think you brought your entire Facebook fan base. Like, I think you brought like probably 35 to 50 people that first show. And that just made me think, I was like, oh, this guy is taking this seriously. Like, he's a hustler just like me. So I saw a lot of myself in him starting around the same time. And I'm like, at least he's bringing something to the table and he's going to hustle. So, and he was funny. So we just kept working together.
And I think that's the best relationships that weren't designed or weren't on the surface as a third party looking at it. You wouldn't hear that story like that's never going to work. Like, there's no way the random guy walking into a casino with a couple hot chicks approaches the promoter of a show, says, hey, you know, this comedy thing, well, how's it work? That rarely has a happy ending.
Well, and also I love surrounding myself with younger people. And Brendan's one of those people with his creativity. He's written so many funny sketches and videos and then produced them himself. And so when it came time to wanting to put together a documentary, I approached Brendan and he took the ball and ran with it. And like 5 minutes later, I'm on stage going, we got a documentary coming.
Dude, you might as well host my show, because it's like you're reading my mind, because that's the next topic we're going to talk about is that documentary. So I'm a huge documentary fan. I love anything that shares the story through the lens of the writer, the producer, director, or the person that it's about. And I think having a story written about you during 2020 was I'm 50. Today's my birthday.
What?
Yeah. So I totally forgot.
Buddy, you're a lunatic. Why don't you be like, we got to reschedule. Today's not good.
I totally forgot. Even when I rescheduled it, I forgot it was my birthday.
You're a lunatic. I love you, buddy.
I don't celebrate my birthday that much.
Clearly.
Yeah, it's just a day in 365. But what I love is that 2020 and my 50 years on the earth was the worst. Not the worst for me personally. Like I didn't change. Nothing happened to me. My life as a cop, I went to work every day. It wasn't in green or red or blue or whatever code color they're telling us we got to be in. I just went to work every day and did my job and lived my life. But for many, many, many millions of people, 2020 was the most fucked up year of their existence. And absent, Vietnam or World War II, this is our world war or whatever. This is what it is. And I love that, what you did, and I'm not, giving you a blowjob here, but what you did for Royersford, the community. And I'm from Pottstown, but I've been living in Royersford now for 16 years. And my dad grew up here. My grandparents live here. It's an important town to me. And I think the fact that you not only, and not to say you're like super famous or anything, but you could have come in and been like, I'm going to have a place here, but I'm never going to have any affiliation with the town, right? You could have big timed it and just been a business owner. And you didn't. You're like ankle deep, knee deep, elbow deep, shoulder deep. By the time it was all done, you're underwater in Royersford, right? You're in every business. You promote all the restaurants during. I remember, the French Quarter Bistro and Marie's and all the businesses. They were, allowing them. You're promoting. Go get food and bring it down to the show, and like all that stuff you were doing for the community. People may not pay attention to, but I did, and I've been watching your growth throughout this year, and I've approached you about some stuff, and it's because I pay attention to things, and I see trajectories, and I know where in my mind, where I think you're headed, and it's meteoric. And I think the fact that you were able to, I wrote a book about my life, and it's the greatest thing I ever did, outside of the fact that it was therapeutic and it helped me deal with my brother's death and all that. But it's also here, I can read it anytime. Anybody can pick it up and read it. It's a journey. It's a catalog of what happened. It's a historical reference point. And I think doing a movie, a documentary about 2020 for you and what you did for not only your business and comics and keeping people employed and your community, I think it's just a brilliant idea of the many brilliant ideas you've had in 2020. Tell me about the documentary.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we wanted to get it on film and kind of remember some of this time, but Brendan did a great job of narrating it and bringing our story to life through interviews of other people, because I don't do a lot of very good job of reflecting and taking the time to really think back. But when I did, and Brendan kind of cut like an interview with myself and then my sister and the Joey St. John, our general manager, and he did it, and all of a sudden, like, to cut to me, and my sister's like just ragging on me because I thought the amphitheater with no sand was like the best thing that ever happened. I'm standing on a 4x4 foot stage before we got the boardwalk field. And then Brendan cuts for my sister going, and Joel thought that was great. And you just cut, and I'm just standing there on the 4x4 foot stage and with nothing there, basically. That was such a funny little clip that Brendan did and putting it all together. It was amazing. It was really cool.
Brendan, when you were given the task, was it your idea? Like, who came up with the idea? First one.
I think we sort of came up with it together, and just I think just in conversation we were like, it would be really cool if we documented this. And then I think Joel was like, hey, you want to direct? You want to do it? I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll see if I can do this. I think that's how, as organically as it came about.
Did you have any I have a nephew who is kind of like you, Joel, where he's just a meteoric. His future is meteoric. My wife's sister's son, oldest son, and my wife's sister passed away from cancer 6 years ago. So he's we're super close, and my son and him are best friends. But he's in school at San Diego State. He's a music videographer. I don't know what the term is, but he's got Meek Mills and all these famous rappers and that are like wanting him to do videos. He's a 20-year-old kid in college, and it all started because he bought a drone, and we have a house in Avalon, my in-laws do, and every summer he'd do a summer video, and that's kind of how it all started. Learning how to do, and he bought all the right computer stuff and the editing and all that, cameras and everything, on from working every summer down the beach. But he's a pro at it, but it took a lot of time. I'm going to assume, Brendan, that you're not that.
That's exactly what I had to do. I mean, I didn't have a laptop to do this on. I didn't have Final Cut, and I didn't have a camera. But I knew, like, long term, these are things that I should invest in, just for my career. Like, it's stuff that I could use for years down the road. So I got a laptop. Literally, I got the trial for Final Cut Pro, the editing software. It just expired today, because I knew, I'm like, it'll give you like a 2-month trial. So if I can finish this in like 2 or 3 months, I won't have to pay for it for now. So
dude, you're speaking my language with that shit. If it's free, it's me.
I just did the free trial and made a movie within 3 months of having a free trial. I had to teach myself Final Cut because I don't know how to edit. And then I bought a camera, and just, I had to teach myself everything. And I've, done, some stuff like that back in college, but like, I didn't know what I was doing at all. And if you see the documentary, like, I think one of the things I do like about it is very raw. It's not like I put in like all these crazy transitions, or like I really know what I'm doing, but like, I think I learned enough to make it, something that I'm really proud of. But yeah, I didn't know, going into this, I didn't know how I was going to do it, what it was going to turn into, and like how I was even going to get it done.
Well, it's funny. One of my good buddies, I had 2 or 3 podcasts ago, I had a guy on, an autistic 44-year-old man who believes that he is a rock and roll legend, who once a year puts on a show where he doesn't play a single instrument. He's an air guitarist, air drummer, air keyboardist. He goes by the name Nick Lightning. He's from Roxborough, and he puts on a show in the Roxborough Community Center once a year, and it takes him 6 months to prepare for it. For the lighting, the costume changes, the song set list. He does 30 songs. Sometimes he just lip syncs, and sometimes he's just mouthing, and sometimes he's singing poorly over top of Bon Jovi singing "Living on a Prayer." But in his mind, he's toured the world. He's opened up for and Bon Jovi. I'm like, and this isn't him being a bullshit. He literally is living his best life in his own brain. And it was the greatest episode I've ever had, because my buddy, who's his best friend, he's a movie producer. If you ever get a chance, get the Billboard Boys, which is a documentary that came out a few years back about a radio station in Allentown back in the 80s did a promo and said, if you can live up on this billboard, live on a billboard. The person that lasts the longest gets a trailer, like an actual like live-in trailer. And it was this big promo, and it's a movie about that. And he had all the local Philadelphia sports people in the movie, and it's great. But he did a short film on Nick Lightning. And it is, and I'm going to send it to you both because it is fucking brilliant. It made me cry, it made me laugh. It just made me feel great. And that's what I'm hoping when I see what you guys did. And it's not rock, now mind you, my buddy's a great movie producer, and his guys are great at what they do. But the rawness of it is what I found the most appealing. The video, the phone video footage or the camcorder footage from when he was a kid, like just having that ability to share a story through words and video and photos is a brilliant, if it's done well, is brilliant. Now, Joel, did you get a little bit uncomfortable knowing that there was going to be a documentary about you, even though you guys collaborated on it? But like, I know I would feel weird about it. Even though I'm very public on a lot of social media and stuff, I'm also a very private guy. Did you feel that way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind the attention, but I was kind of like, oh, I wonder how it's going to come out. And I just wanted people to like it. And Brendan, first and foremost, he just wanted to make our team proud and hope that I liked it. My sister liked it, and Joe, everybody on our team. But I think, and we kind of talked about how we should put it all together. And I think Brendan came up with the best idea of really painting the picture with old videos that we had, because I thought we were going to have to build our comedy club from scratch. That was a couple of the ideas right before we opened the place here in Royersford. And even in Royersford, we had a couple of other spots located and pinpointed, but we ended up here. So we started documenting all this stuff back then. And now 2 years later, all that footage ended up being the most useful. And he did a great job of building it up from before and then during the inside time period, and then all of a sudden COVID hitting. So you he really felt like you were on a roller coaster ride. So that rawness that you felt from that other documentary, I think Brandon did a great job of that for us and really painting the picture.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it. So is it available on like online, or is it old school, like selling Hawkins CDs and DVDs out of your trunk?
Yeah, it's on SoulJoel TV on YouTube. So it's YouTube/SoulJoel TV. And then it's right there. And all of our social media, we posted the links. But yeah, it's available for free. And then we're taking Venmo tips, and all the Venmo tips go directly to Brendan.
Because I'm sure this was more of a, you weren't paid, right? It wasn't like Joel's like, hey, I'm going to hire you to do a movie. Like I'm sure it was hey, got this great idea, buddy. What do you think about this? And you're like, sure, I'm in. But you probably didn't think that through immediately, right? There was probably this sort of like excitement, because I do that literally. I start companies because I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Fucking I go. And I'm like, when I get there, I'm like, fuck, I didn't think this through. Like, totally. Were you there?
100%. I mean, I exactly like you said, like I started because I was really excited about this idea. And then, once I got into it, I'm like, holy shit, this is a lot harder than I realized. But once I commit to something, I'm going to complete it. It's just, my stubborn nature. But also the club just meant so much to me that I really wanted to do it. Like, like you were saying, 2020 was such a shit year for so many people. I mean, just for so many people, for so many different reasons. Me personally, probably one of the worst years of my life. I mean, just, on top of, pandemic, then I moved to New York. I'm like, I'm moving to the big city, baby. I literally signed the lease with my girlfriend right before the pandemic hit in March. to do comedy in New York, and then, obviously comedy, the one thing, I really look forward to, because I still work a day job. It sucks the fucking life out of me. But the one thing I really look forward to is comedy. And then that gets taken away from me, which I never, ever thought would. I moved to New York. Nothing's happening. I don't know if the club's going to open back up. Then my dad dies out of the blue. He was 62 years old, healthy, just a super healthy guy, and was a huge role model for me. And it was just brutal, man. But the one thing, you guys had mentioned like how much the club meant to Royersford. Not only that, Royersford small business owners, but I mean, it got me through. Like, it gave me some purpose. It kept comics alive. Like, doing comedy for me at this point can be very therapeutic, and just having having something to look forward to in 2020 was so big. And it was one of those things where, like, when you look back on certain times that were really, maybe tough with buddies or something, when you're in the trenches, whatever it is, and you go like, man, the good old days. Like, we all had talked about the fact that it was such a shit year and it was so tough, but we're like, this is a moment in time we're never going to forget. Like, when are we ever going to have another year where there was a pandemic, where Joel started a club in a grass field with nothing, and it was just so crazy. So we're like, we have to document this so that we can look back on this and go, holy shit, how crazy was that? So just with that whole idea of that as the end goal, I'm like, we gotta finish this. But yeah, it was difficult.
I loved your analogy there, because as a veteran, Gulf War, been a cop for 28 years, been in some fucked up situations. The greatest stories are the ones from like the most fucked up situations, right? Those are the ones when you get through it and you live it and you survive it, and you're like, all right, well, that was fucked up. And then in 2 years, you're telling fucking jokes about it like it was the greatest time ever. Yeah, because you went through it. And that's what basic training is. That's what fucking CrossFit is. The reason why CrossFit exists is because it's like common misery that everybody goes through every day. But then they talk about how great that common misery was because they're doing it together. And I think when you do something collectively through a really shitty period of time, it not only brings you together, but then it creates that we did this. And you can always have that in your history when you're sitting around and you're famous fucking comics and you're famous, you've got places, SoulJoel over the fucking country, and you're like, dude, remember fucking 2020? That fucking year was crazy, dude. You had opened a fucking club. We put a beach in the goddamn middle of Royersford, right? Like what is that? Yeah. And I think that's cool that you took the time, and not for nothing, that footage you had for 2 years, that was God preparing you for this. That was the universe preparing you for this moment, that you had to have that.
You know what else?
So, there's nothing random.
Another thing that was funny about that is I found this old footage that Joel had on an old YouTube page that really showed that, because it was Joel, Giannis Pappas, and Nate Bargatze from like 2009 in this shit bar. Like,
no, that was my college. That was my college.
At Wagner College.
This shit bar. They gave me a diploma.
Well, the gig looked, let's say this, you guys have come a long way since then. I mean, like, Giannis and Nate, like, they just look like poor, struggling comics, because you guys all were. And then there's podcast footage of Nate, who just had a recent Netflix special. He's had 2 or 3 at this point, and he had Giannis on, and they're talking about the old SoulJoel gigs. And, they're at this level now of comedians, and they're doing exactly that. They're talking about, so I found this old clip of them back in the trenches. So I am hoping that at some point I'll be them down the road, and we have this documentary to look back on and go, holy shit, that was crazy, but it was a lot of fun.
Dude, this is really cool. I think, we lost Joel. Joel popped out. Text him and let him know he got zapped, but we'll get him back in. Goddamn internet. Dude, I'll wait for Joel to get back on, because I want to tell the story of like, I don't even think he knows that I was a cop in Royersford. before. That was first place I was ever a cop. That's where I got
Yeah.
hired when I was out of the Army. And I have a pretty whacked out story that I want to share with him because I don't think he knows it. I don't think I've ever told him it. But
He said he's coming back on.
the cool thing that I love about your story is that you're obviously a good guy. Like, you're just a good person. I can sense that. I love the fact that you have an appreciation for those that helped you get somewhere. Yeah, I've mentored 500 kids in the last 30 years, and not all of them are appreciative today. You know, but they're not all. I'm not all in their life still today, but I have a good solid 20 or 30 that are, and that as the mentor, as the somebody who's helped them along the way and continues to this day. It's cool to see someone who's being mentored have that appreciation for the mentor who's put out a lot of time and energy and probably didn't ask anything in return from you. Like, that's he just wants you to be successful, and you being successful makes him successful.
Totally. I just, I think it's so important. And I try to check myself a lot, as soon as I start to feel my ego, like getting, any level of big, I have to check myself and go like, every opportunity that I've had is because I've had so many people help me along the way. Joel being, the prime example, because, we're on this call and talking about this documentary, but like, I'll have to check, if I wasn't checking myself and saying like, Joel's not really getting much in, the goal for me that I would love is I want to be a big, comedian that is a big draw one day, so that I can pay it forward for the guy that helped me get there. I mean, that's what I dream about doing. But I think that just comes from my whole life. I've had people helping me. I mean, like, my family, not to get, too in detail about that, but like, we had a lot of struggles, like growing up and stuff like that. And I had a lot of friends, and I have a big family, and I've just had so many people help me that I just constantly never feel like I, deserve it. And I don't mean that in a pessimistic way. I constantly feel grateful for the help that I've gotten from people. So like, it's just, that is one of the biggest things that bothers me, especially with people in comedy, when I see them just not taking it seriously or thinking that they are too good for something. I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, I don't care how big you are. Like, you're not too good. Like, if you're doing a gig, show up, be respectful, do your time, thank the person that put you up, or don't fucking take the gig. Like, so there's little, like, that's just such a pet peeve of mine.
I'm with you on that. And the question, Joe, what I asked him before you rudely left our show, what I talked about was that I was a mentor to a lot of kids, and not everybody that I've mentored is still in my life today, or maybe they appreciate it and they just never said it, whatever. But having, 15, 20, 30 kids that are still in my life that I've mentored, who do appreciate the role that I played in their life, and I appreciate the role they played in mine, I'll just ask them about having a mentor like you, and having somebody who's gave time, energy, and effort to help him learn the business and grow his skill set, and including him in things that are business related for you. They are, this is a business decision to put out a documentary that is going to be utilized as a marketing tool or whatever. Having him do that's a big ask, and that's a big trust.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is the last show that we did before the shutdown was with Brendan and my mentor, Julian McCullough, who was a year older than me in high school. And we were both on the show, and Julian sat in the back, hadn't seen Brendan in probably like a year. So he saw like Brendan really progress, and he's telling me, he's like, man, Brendan got good. Like, Julian, after being in the business for like 20 years, was nervous to follow Julian. And Brendan's like, get out of here, man. But to hear that, and also like, Julian was the first guy that I saw get to work with all the greats like Dave Attell and Patrice O'Neill, all these guys. And he told me, he's like, this is going to be a weird analogy, but treat comedy like the mafia. Just keep your fucking mouth shut and you're going to be okay. And I understood that. And he goes, whatever year you think this is going to be your breakout year, he goes, it's going to happen 2 or 3 years past that. And after we started announcing all these big guys like Andrew Dice Clay and Russell Peters and D.L. Hughley, he read, you know, he opened up my newsletter, and I get a lot of people that are like, oh, why aren't you hiring me? Why aren't you hiring me? And Julian just sent me this nice text message. He goes, I am so proud of you. He goes, this whole pandemic has washed out a lot of guys that shouldn't have been in this business, but it helped you. He goes, I told you, if you just hung in there, it was going to happen. Might have taken a few more years later, but it finally happened. And to get that text message from him, and to him, he literally got off the plane in Philadelphia, and he was like, what's going on, buddy? I go, I think you're getting right back on that plane. I think you're leaving. That's how quickly it changed in that 5-hour flight from LA to Philly. We did one show in South Jersey, and then Friday, Saturday, he was supposed to headline here in Royersford, and he never made it. We still have his headshot ready to sign.
It's such a, life is a fickle thing, but if you look at it from the perspective of learning and educating and growing, like people are like, I hate it. And I managed a lot of people with anxiety online on social media with the pandemic and with the election and politics and everything, just trying to help people sort through the misinformation, disinformation, and just try to come at it from a logical perspective, just to give them a someone that they trust perspective on something. And then there's always the people that are just, we're all fucked, right? That's their mindset is, we're all fucked. If this doesn't happen, we're fucked. If this doesn't happen, we're fucked. And I look at it, I go, I look at it as thankful. Like, I want to experience everything life has. I want to test my mettle every single fucking day. I don't want an easy day. I don't want the day where it's just like, whatever. I want every day to have meaning, because I don't know if tomorrow's coming, right? Every day for me is a fucking amazing moment. And whether or not I seize the day or not every day is impossible to do that. But the goal is to do that, and to be aware, and to be cognizant and intentional. And when you have your life, what you're doing every single day, you have to be intentional. I mean, you can be all over the place because there's a lot of things happening, but you're intentional in what you're planning to do that day for your business, for the community, for the comedians, and why you're bringing them there. You literally kept food on the table for comedians, right?
Right.
These guys, and it's not simply they're like, oh great, let's go to Royersford. Oh, it's either New York City or LA or Chicago or Royersford. That wasn't it. It was, there's nobody offering fucking gigs, and we got to have the gigs. And you were smart enough and adept enough and had enough standing within the community to be like, come here. And sure as fuck, they're here and they're loving it and they're killing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's, and Royersford, and you were talking about, is only 4,900 people or whatever it is. But people don't, it's 0.8 of a square mile. And the reason why I know that is I was a cop here in Royersford, and that was my first cop job full-time in 1993 to 1996. And you don't know this, I don't think. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was, remember the tornado that came through? You reading it, they talk about that in 1994, July 28th, 1994. There was a tornado that came through Royersford and then hit Limerick and was very destructive. And I was actually on duty, and my police car was picked up. I was at 5th and Main going up towards Lewis Road, and I was at the light where Giovanni's Pizza is. And I got picked up from there, and I got dropped into the 700 block of Main Street.
What? Three blocks? Two or three blocks?
In my police car. I had no idea what was happening because I couldn't see anything. And it was like, and all I felt was the landing. And I landed right on the wheels, and the wheels went up into the bottom of the car, totaled the car. But yeah,
how quick did that happen?
2 seconds.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was weird. It was but that's, this town is a resilient fucking town. It's a blue collar town. It's got a cool Main Street. Movies have been filmed here. That's like it's a cool, like, not just your movie, real big time movies were filmed here.
I knew what you meant. We didn't have to explain it, Matt. We got it.
But other people may not. They'll be like, oh my God, he's talking about the movie, the documentary for Joel. No, I'm talking about real fucking movies. Yeah, Hollywood. So it's a cool town. And I think now that you've created this place, it's a destination now for comedians. And it's not just small mom and pop shops on Main Street in Royersford. At the end of Main Street, before you go across the bridge, you bang a right and you're at SoulJoel's. And that's a destination where people are going to want to be every single day of the week. And that's the brilliance of it.
Thanks, man.
And I'm so proud of you. And I enjoy watching your journey. I enjoyed watching the struggle. I did, because I always want to see, how does somebody handle shit, right? It's easy to be fucking great when it's great. But it's hard to be great when you're getting a shit sandwich every single day.
Well, you know what's funny? You mentioned about being a destination. Comics, it's almost like I'm a glorified babysitter sometimes. And people ask me like, hey, what's the address? How do I get there? We're literally in Google Maps. We're literally in Google Maps. All you got to do, you type in SoulJoel's. That's all you got to do. It's going to tell you exactly where we're at. Like, I didn't book you somewhere else. It's at SoulJoel's. One of the comics, I don't know if this was mentioned in the documentary or not, but we had Keith Robinson, who I've known for years. His kids literally beat him to the gig last summer. He was at Valley Forge. I'm like, Keith, what are you doing? He just went to the last place that I booked him. I'm like, it's not even in Google. Like, how did we get here? How did we get here?
You can't make that shit up.
You can't.
Brandon, I think, first of all, I've never heard your comedy, but I can only assume it's great because I don't think Joe would associate or put his time, energy, and effort into someone who sucks. So I think that's good. So that's a stamp of approval. I'll make sure I coordinate with Joel next time that you're there so we can meet in person and I get to hear either. And even if you bomb, I'm going to laugh just to make you feel good. And then afterwards, I'll be like, yo, dude, you shit the bed. You got to work on your routine there. But no, I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not. But because I am that kind of guy. But I really am excited for your future. I'm excited that Joel is part of it. And I think if you maintain that humbleness and that thankfulness and gratefulness and appreciation for the journey, I realized when I wrote a book about my life, which was required for me to heal, which I didn't know at the time was what I needed to heal. But when you go back and relive your life all over again in your mind and then put it on paper, you realize that it's not simply a bunch of random moments that somehow got you to where you are. They're all connected. Every single day of your life is connected to the next. And every decision you make is vital to the overall ending of your life. And the reason why it's called Two Dates and a Dash, my podcast, is because your life's made up of two dates and a dash. The date you're born, the date you die, and the dash is the life that you lived. And it's important for people to live intentionally and to recognize the moments as they're happening rather than waiting until you're 35 years old and grieving for 13 years without really grieving over your brother's death, where you finally get the appreciation of the journey and the fact that those moments were all important. And I thank God every day that I had a chance to relive my life and put it on paper, or else I don't know where the fuck I'd be today. Yeah. So I think the fact that you did this video, this documentary, and the fact that you clearly are in tune with the universe and the things around you, don't lose that. Because I think that's the thing that's going to actually get you to where you want to go.
Thank you, man. I mean, this is I thoroughly enjoyed this. I love just connecting with genuine people, like who obviously you are. It's just it's great to connect with like-minded people who kind of think the same way, and it's given me a lot more meaning, to think about this documentary as you just said that. So thank you so much.
Joel, buddy, you and I will be talking. I can't thank you enough for what you do for our community. And I know it's not done with the intent of being, look at me, it's done with the purest of intentions. And that when you support local businesses, you're doing it because you truly want them to be successful as well. And you're appreciative of the fact that they're supporting you. And I think that resonates clearly in all your social media and then your personal interactions as well. So hang tight, guys. I don't know. We probably won't be able to stay on video when this is done because and for the record, I'm too cheap to pay for Zoom. Let's just be honest.
That's a perfect way to end, Matt. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Kaboom. We're done. No, but everybody, thank you for watching and listening to the Two Dates in the Dash podcast. It's always a joy for me to share stories of people that I may or may not know with you. And it's as new for me as it is for you when you're listening to it most of the time. And that's one of the coolest things about being a podcast host is I get to have these conversations, and typically with people I may not ever have had a conversation with in any other circumstance. But don't forget, make sure you hit subscribe and automatic download wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you go to my YouTube channel, Matt Cubbler, and subscribe there and click the little bell thingy so you get alerts when I have new videos. And again, if you want to learn more about me and my book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, yes, that's me. I'm not picking my nose. I'm biting my finger, but everybody thinks I'm yanking out big boogie out of my nose. And that's my brother, Andy. If you want to learn more about that, you can order on Amazon. You can go to my website and order through there as well. Everybody, thank you. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.